Welcome back to More Than Gardening. I am canning up a ton of pasta sauce today, and I'm gonna take you with me and show you my recipe and my process. I already have a big stock pot next to me full of fresh tomatoes that have been harvested over the last week or so. I grabbed them from my tomato racks this morning, which I think you probably would have saw in my last video. Is just where I keep all my tomatoes once I harvest them, and then if I harvest them before they're ripe, they just finish ripening there. And I quartered these, I cored them, and I think this stock pot this is actually my water bath canner. I think it's like 21.5 quarts, and it's almost completely full. So there's a ton of tomatoes in here. I also have some tomatoes from the freezer that I've been thawing over the last day or so that I'm gonna add to this pot. I'm gonna show you what those look like, because this is kind of like a hack if you wanna be canning tomato products because you're growing tomatoes, but maybe you don't have enough fresh tomatoes at one time to fill a pot like this, or you're just getting a few here, a few there, and you don't know what to do. What you can do is just as they're coming in smaller batches, you can just cut the tops off or core them, throw them in the freezer, and then the day before you're gonna can, put them out in a bowl. Let me show you what I've got. You can put them in a bowl on your countertop and let them just sit throughout the day. And then as they thaw and defrost, so I did this yesterday, you can dump out all of the liquid into your sink like this. And this is just all of the tomato water, or the defrosting water that you would end up boiling off in the canning process anyways. That would take hours on your stovetop. So being able to freeze them, thaw them, and then just pour this off. Oops, almost lost one. And then just pour this off just saves hours of boiling time later. So that's a little bit of a hack. They look a little crazy right now because as they thaw, I would press down on them to extract that juice. So I've been putting a ton of pressure on them and then dumping them out all day yesterday. But this is actually this looks like a small bowl, and now I'm looking at my stock pot. I'm like, are these even gonna fit? Well, I'm gonna push on them so that they do fit, because I need to fill that entire bowl. But yeah, that is a little bit of a trick if you don't have enough fresh tomatoes at once. You can put them in the freezer. And then I've also got, this morning I went out to the garden and harvested a ton of parsley, which is in here, which we're gonna be using for the sauce today. And then I've got a bunch of basil, and I also grabbed probably about 90% of the oregano that was out there. So I'm gonna be using all these fresh herbs in the sauce today. I'm gonna be using red and probably yellow onion too, both types of onions that I harvested over the last, I don't know, a few weeks to a month ago. At this point, I can't even remember when I harvested those, but that will all be going into the sauce, which makes it super, super fresh. But if you don't have fresh herbs from your garden, if you don't even have, fresh tomatoes to use in this, you could even use canned tomatoes or canned tomato sauce, herbs from the store, already dried. The recipe really does work either way, whether it's you're making it fully from your garden or you're making it from store-bought ingredients. So I'll leave my entire recipe in the description of this video. I do want to say my recipe is not a fully tested and vetted recipe by I guess USDA or Ball Canning or anyone like that. It's a recipe I came up with that I based off other tested recipes and then just tweaked to my tasting. I feel perfectly safe with it. I've been canning it for a couple of years now. With that said, can at your own risk. If you do want to only follow tested recipes, I will leave a link in the description to a canning book full of safe tested recipes if that's what you're looking for. But this is what I do, and this is what works for me. So I have my pot of all of my fresh tomatoes, and I'm just gonna spread them out a little bit to make room because I need to add this entire bowl of my freezer tomatoes to it, which, whew, this is a lot. Okay, just very carefully, and I'm gonna give it a good push with all of my weight and strength to try to get it to go down. Nice, okay, just barely fits. And then I'm just gonna put this on a medium heat and just let this simmer down until it's nice and liquidy. This is how it looks about an hour and a half later. You can see all the tomatoes are pretty cooked down, and it's just this liquidy kind of slosh. So I'm gonna take this, I'm gonna start putting it through my tomato food mill. That way I can separate out the seeds and the skins from the actual tomato sauce. Tomato food mill is probably one of my favorite canning gadgets for canning anything with a tomato sauce base, because you can just load up your heated tomato mixture into this top hopper and then it goes through and the whole machine separates out the juice from the skins and the stems for you. I will leave a link in the description of this video. If you're looking for something to make canning up like tomato sauce based products easier, I highly recommend this food mill. I just ran all the tomatoes through the food mill, and this is how much sauce I have, which is quite a bit because I think this is 21.5 quarts. So this is gonna make a ton of pasta sauce, and I'm just looking at the thickness of this. It's really not too thin. However, for pasta sauce, I want it to be a little bit thicker. So I'm just gonna let it simmer on my stove for a little bit longer just so it can thicken up. The tomato sauce has been going for about an hour and a half, and it's reduced to a pretty good thickness. So I'm gonna go in and add my onion. I did a mix of both red and yellow. And if I had another burner that I could access right now, and if I had a little bit more energy, I would put the onion in like a cast iron with some butter or olive oil just to kind of char it a little bit to give it more flavor. But this is gonna be just fine adding them raw too, because they will cook in the sauce and in the canner. But if you've got a little extra time and you want a little bit more flavor, I would recommend doing that. And then I also have some garlic that I'm adding. I've got oregano, parsley, and basil from the garden going in. And then a bunch of different seasonings, which will all be in, everything will be in the description of this video, the whole recipe. And then 3/4 cups of Worcestershire sauce, which I almost forgot. And then I'm just gonna mix everything, and I'm gonna let this cook together for about like 15 or 20 minutes. And while this is cooking, I have 2 water bath canners going, preheating jars. This is actually my pressure canner, but you can use it as a water bath canner. Water bath canners are just giant pots with racks on the bottom. So since this is my actual water bath canner and I'm using it to make the sauce, I'm using the pressure canner as a water bath canner. And then I also have my Ball Easy canner over here, which I'll show you guys for another load. That way I can have 2 full canner loads going. So those jars are preheating while this is going to all kind of like cook and mix together. It's been about 15 or 20 minutes, and the sauce is a really good thickness, and I've taste tested it and it tastes really good. So I'm gonna start filling my quart jars. I'm gonna take these out one by one, center it, and grab my funnel, and I'm just gonna start scooping my sauce into each jar really carefully because it's really hot. I'm gonna fill each of these to a 1/2 inch of headspace. And most like tested recipe books, and some people will say you need to add either lemon juice or vinegar to bring up the acidity to water bath can pasta sauce or like tomato sauce based products. I've never done that. A lot of like people that have been canning for decades and like Italians and everyone, they don't do that. Tomatoes are acidic enough in my opinion, so I'm not gonna be adding anything, but if you're worried about it for a quart jar, you can add, I think it's like 2 tablespoons of either vinegar or lemon juice. But I'm just gonna fill to a 1/2 inch, which I need just a touch more. Get my headspace tool, and that's perfect. I'm gonna wipe the rim clean and then add a lid and a band. And the band's just gonna go fingertip tight. And then I'm gonna load this back into my canner. And then I'm just gonna repeat that until all of my jars are filled and I don't have any more sauce left. I have 7 full quart jars in this canner and 7 full quart jars in this canner, and I just hit go on this one to go for 40 minutes. So there's 1 inch of water covering all of the jars, and now they're just gonna process at a boil for 40 minutes. Once that time is up, I'm gonna cut the heat and let them sit in the canner for 5 minutes while they cool down, and then I'll remove them from the canners and set them on a towel on my countertop where they'll then sit for about 12 to 24 hours. This is all 14 quart jars canned. Most of them have already sealed. I've been hearing like pops here and there. So I'm really happy about that. I did actually fill one more quart jar, but the canner can only take, like each canner can only take 7 quarts each. I can only do 14 at a time. So that 15th one I just put in the refrigerator and we'll eat it this week with some pasta. So really happy with how this turned out. It did take me kind of all day. Oh, did you hear that? That pop is one sealing. So if you hear that and you're new to canning, don't be scared. That's a really good sign. So these are just gonna sit out overnight now. Tomorrow morning, I will remove the bands. I'll check the seals. As long as the lids are pushed down or like concave down, and when I hit them, they don't bounce back at me, then I know they're sealed. I'll give them a good wash, and then I'll write on the top of them, pasta sauce, 925, because I made them in September of 2025. Again, I will leave the entire recipe in the description of this video, and I'll also leave links to everything I use to can up the pasta sauce. If you try this recipe, please let me know how you like it. Make sure to follow me on Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook. I will leave all of those links in the description of this video, and I will see you in my next one. Thanks for watching.